I came across a crazy trade proposal on Twitter through BPM Sports, which is a Montreal media outlet that I wanted to discuss with you today, that would involve Connor Bedard becoming a Montreal Canadien if they do not win the draft lottery. We'll discuss the scenario and discuss if it's something they should do coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we came across an interesting trade proposal that I wanted to discuss with you here today. Now, of course, this is not a rumor per se that Montreal is really seriously considering doing this. Of course, at this point, we don't even know who's picking first overall yet because the draft lottery has not been completed. But this outlet, which is BPM Sports, I'll show you their Twitter account, is a big following, a Montreal media outlet. Obviously, talks a lot about the Montreal Canadiens. They put out a poll on Twitter suggesting a trade between the Montreal Canadiens and the winner of the draft lottery for a trade that would send captain Nick Suzuki and young goal scorer Cole Caufield to this team in exchange for the rights to Connor Bedard. Now, you could also probably throw in, let's say, that whoever the team is that wins the lottery, you maybe even adjust this deal. It doesn't specifically say, but we're going to go on the assumption that they're either going to make the trade after the draft, or more than likely what they would do is include first-round picks. So let's say Montreal ends up picking, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, wherever they end up with, depending on how the lottery goes, and they swap spots with number one. So then they would also get a first-rounder coming back as well. So they would essentially get the number one pick in exchange for the whatever pick they have, any of these two players. And whether or not this is something that they would do, or would you want them to do it if you're a fan of the team? Surprisingly, it was closer than I thought, with a 60-40 split, showing 60% saying, no, I wouldn't do it, and 40% saying, yes, I would. Now, let's take a look at these players and really talk this out and see if this is really a wise idea. Now, of course, it takes two to tango in an NHL trade. Keep that in mind. Even if the Montreal Canadiens do not win the lottery and they did make this offer to the team that did, it doesn't mean that they're going to accept. Obviously, Connor Bedard is a big deal. He's considered a generational talent, and regardless of who wins that draft lottery, I don't know the odds of that pick being traded. I would think it's going to take a pretty outlandish offer for them to even sit and think about it. But let's take a look at what this would mean for the Habs from their perspective. So, of course, you get Nick Suzuki, okay? He is the captain of the team. He's 23 now. He'll be 24 going into next season. He's just finishing up the first year of an 8-year contract extension where he's making $7.875 million. The past two seasons, he's averaging between 60 65 points. Of course, this year's not 100% done. They still have another game left. So obviously his numbers could change slightly. But so far, he's looking like a 60 65 point player. Now, of course, he's the number one center in Montreal. They haven't had the greatest teams the past couple of seasons. He's had Cole Caufield miss a decent amount of time. So you could probably say that Nick Suzuki has not peaked as of yet. I think there's a pretty good chance that Nick Suzuki has a chance to go a little bit higher in his point totals and at least get to a point where he can consistently for a few years be 75, 80 points. I mean, I don't know, maybe he can do better than that. But at this point, I think it's fair to say he can do better for sure than what he's done so far. If he can have a healthy Cole Caufield, and depending on who else's line mate is on the other side, and if as his team gets better, his numbers should get better as well. Now, of course, he's a pretty mature guy. It seems like he's a pretty good captain material for that market. He's doing his best to learn the French language a little bit, because it's a little bit unusual for a non-French speaking player to be captain of the franchise. Obviously, that's something very important to them, is that the ability to communicate with the French media as well as the French fans. So obviously that's, I said, something that we didn't see coming, but at the same time, like I said, he is a good candidate, a good player, mature player, plays the right way, seems like a good off-ice person as well. So certainly, from all respects, a good captain candidate, regardless of the language concessions there. Now, of course, looking at Cole Caufield, he's 22 years old. He'll be 23 partway through next season. He's got 2 seasons under his belt now, partial of a third. So his entry-level contract is expiring. He needs a new contract this offseason. There's a big debate on what Cole Caufield is going to be getting paid. I would suspect the Habs would prefer to lock him up on an 8-year deal as well. His price tag is certainly not likely going to get any cheaper as time goes on. In year one, as a rookie, he played in 67 games, put up 23 goals. If you project that out to an 82-game pace, if he's able to play all 82 games, he was on pace to score with 28 goals for his first season in the league, especially considering, he's going to have a little bit tougher time. He's a smaller guy, so I'm not saying the smaller guys can't be successful. Clearly they can, and he will be and has been so far, and he's going to be more successful than he's been so far. But, obviously, size and strength does play a role in your ability to succeed. And considering all things, I thought that was a really solid rookie campaign for him. Now, this year, of course, he ended up with a shoulder injury and was a big chunk of the season. He only appeared in 46 games, but he scored 26 goals. So he was able to outproduce himself in the first season by 3 goals, and he did so in almost just over 20 games fewer. So that's a big difference. If you take 26 goals or 46 games and you project that out, if you were to play all 82 and continue to score at the same pace, that's a 46 goal campaign or pace to me. That's pretty solid for a 22-year-old player. Obviously, could he be a 50 goal scorer? I don't think it's out of the question when he's on pace for 46 at age 22. I think he's not reached his full potential. He's got at least a couple more years before he peaks. Maybe 2 or 3 more seasons. Seems like players are typically peak around that 25, 26 range, and usually can hold their prime stats for, 3, 4, 5 years, sometimes longer. It just depends on the player, depends on their health, depends on injuries and all that. All that plays a role. So certainly Caufield at this point is going to be in line for a pretty hefty contract. I think his new contract is likely going to outpace Suzuki's. So between the two, you're probably looking at 7.85 or 7.875 for Suzuki. I don't know what Cole Caufield's going to make. Would he take an $8 million deal per season, 8 times 8? I don't know. Let's just say for argument's sake that he does. Then you're closing in just a little shy of $16 million per season for your 2/3 of your top line. That's really not that bad. Now, that's assuming Cole takes an $8 million deal. I'm not sure what his side of things was, he and his agent, what they're looking for. But based on what he's scored so far, I don't know if it's going to be drastically more than that. I mean, you wouldn't think, but we'll see, right? Now, you got Connor Bedard, who is considered to be a generational talent. He just wrapped up a playoff series where his team, the Regina Pats, who were the underdogs in the series, forced Game 7. So they took a 7-game series to the Saskatoon Blades, and in 7 games, he put up 20 points. That's absolutely phenomenal. He put that team on his back without Connor Bedard. They don't come anywhere close to winning that series, let alone winning maybe a game in that series. That's crazy. Now, in his WHL career, he's appeared in 119 games, and he's put up 243 points, 122 goals. That's more than a goal per game, more than an assist per game. That's 122 goals, 121 assists. That's a crazy number. That's more than 2 points per game. That's just shy of 2.1 points per game. We're talking, like I said before, when talking about Bedard, Connor Bedard, in my opinion, is likely going to be, and this is all projection, so things could happen, injuries could happen, not everybody fulfills their potential. But based on projections, based on how things look, I think it's a fair argument to say that if you look at all the recent first-round picks, if you go back to the last player that was kind of considered to be a generational talent, that would be Connor McDavid in 2015. I think he's going to be the top producing player since him. I think he'll be comparable to a guy like Matthews. Matthews, I don't think we can really call him a generational talent, but he's certainly an awesome franchise-altering player. Look what he's done for the Maple Leafs. But look at what this year, for example, huge difference between the output of Matthews and McDavid. Both phenomenal players, very different players, and to me, McDavid is generational. Of course, not so. Usually when you see generational players, you're talking on a player of which you don't only see every 10 to 20 years. And that to me is how good McDavid is. Look at what he's doing. He's setting records for things that you haven't seen in 20, 30 years or more, in some cases up there with the all-time greats. Whereas, Bedard has that kind of potential. At least that's how things look today. So if you look at all the first-round picks in between McDavid and most recently, as of last year in 2022, Juraj Slafkovsky, I think this guy is going to be like the best one since McDavid and be comparable to McDavid at some point. If you look at the junior numbers, McDavid, when he was playing in junior hockey, he appeared in 103 games. So he played a little bit fewer games than Connor Bedard did. and he put up 219 points, which is also phenomenal. 2.12 points per game. That's just slightly more than Bedard. Bedard is right there, putting up McDavid-like numbers at that level. Now, of course, McDavid played in the OHL, Bedard played in the WHL, slightly different styles of game, a little bit different, obviously a little difference in timing and all that, but still, that's why I think Bedard is in many ways comparable to this guy. They're not going to play the same way, though. I think Bedard's style is going to be closer to that of a combination of Matthews and a few other players maybe around the league. Like, he's going to be a shoot-first mentality, like the guy's got a wicked shot, and obviously that's what he's most known for. But if you're Montreal, would you offer to switch first-round picks with whoever wins the lottery, Suzuki and Caufield? I can understand why some people would think that it's a good idea. To be completely honest, I would have no problem parting with Suzuki in this type of trade. I like Nick Suzuki. I think he's a great player. But to get Connor Bedard, I'd part with him in a heartbeat. Now, Cole Caufield is where things complicate things, because obviously if you lose Suzuki and Caufield, as much as Bedard is generational, it's tempting, I tell you that, because if Cole Caufield goes on to be a consistent 50-plus goal scorer, then that's obviously, a big loss. And if Bedard is consistent 50-plus goal scorer in a couple of years' time when he starts to hit his prime, are you any better off? It's hard to say. Not to say that Caufield is going to be as good as Bedard. I don't think that's the case. It would just be a major loss. If you could have Bedard and Caufield together, that's an absolutely sick scenario that it would make you that much better. So overall, I don't know. I mean, if I'm Montreal, it's certainly debatable. It's tempting for sure, because this guy is that good. He's going to put butts in the seats. He's selling out buildings in the Western Hockey League. Like, no matter where they went as the Regina Pats team, the arenas across that league were selling out. People were trying to see this guy. He's going to sell tickets. He's going to be a mega merch producer. This guy is so good for an organization in the NHL on a multitude of ways. So clearly, everybody should do everything in their power to try to get this guy. But the next question, like I said, it doesn't matter who gets that first-round pick. If it's not Montreal, if they're not fortunate to get it for a second year in a row, if it ends up being the Anaheim Ducks or the Columbus Blue Jackets or the Chicago Blackhawks or the Philadelphia Flyers or the Sharks or one of those teams that are in the bottom five, which have way better odds than the Habs do, are they going to want to consider this type of trade? A lot of those teams are in rebuilding mode, right? So they know that they're not going to be super competitive, and they're not going to be, really trying to compete for a cup probably for at least a couple more years. Like, they need Bedard and more to really elevate. Now, Connor Bedard will be a game changer for some of these teams, and I can see some of these teams as well, if they're fortunate enough to draft Bedard, that they'll probably change their approach to rebuilding and trying to add pieces quickly around him, because they think that they'll be that much better, that much quicker with him in the lineup than just an average player that we've seen, a high first-round pick in the last 5-10 years. Look at some of the other players we've seen go high, and yes, most of them have gone to the NHL right away. They'll have an impact, but not what he's expected to do. The expectation and everything on him is going to be substantially higher. Like, we know San Jose is going through a rebuild, but if they get Bedard, I say they completely change gears, and they go a different route, and they try to add pieces to be more competitive right away, or quick as possible. Whereas a team like Chicago or Arizona or maybe not Columbus. I think Columbus would be taking a different approach too. But like Chicago, if they are Anaheim, if they get Bedard, they're not going to change course at all. They're already progressing with the way they want, and they will see big jumps and big gains from having Bedard, and they'll be happy to contend for playoffs in a few years' time, and then let him be in his prime when they're really ready to compete. That much I can see. So I don't really think, to be completely honest, regardless of who gets this pick, if they are offered Suzuki and Caufield, I don't think they're going to accept. So Montreal can dream about the possibility of trading for Bedard, even if they're not fortunate enough to win the lottery and have the right to select him via draft. I just don't think there's any way that whoever gets this pick, I don't think there's any chance that they're gonna trade the pick. I think the player is just too good, and it's too good from a business perspective, from an on-ice perspective, and there's just no chance. To me, Suzuki and Caufield are great players. I just don't see it happening. And in Montreal, yes, you could get the benefit of having Connor Bedard, but to lose, potential consistent 50-goal scorer in Caufield and your top centerman, I think it sets you back for a while. So I don't know that it's really wise, but I would be really tempted to pull the trigger if I'm Montreal. I just don't think there's any chance it's going to be accepted. But let me know your thoughts on this survey put out by BPM Sports. Do you think there's any chance at all that the pick would be traded, that Montreal will have a legit shot at acquiring the pick for Bedard with offering up these players if they're not fortunate enough to win the draft lottery? I don't think it can happen, but I'd like to know what your thoughts are in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on the survey, and we'll discuss in the comments and talk about it further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. I'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.